Alright, this is my audience. Alright, so how many of you have ever been in a bar or a restaurant and you order yourself a drink or a meal and then right away someone just sits next to you and lights up a cigarette and starts smoking? Well, that's happened to me a couple times at some bars, and it really it ruins your mood and kind of puts a damper on the whole evening, or at least on the moment. Um, I know some of y'all aren't old enough to go to bars yet, but when you do, I think you'll find this to be a big of a nuisance and a non-attraction as I do currently. So I would just start off by saying that cities should have the right to ban smoking in restaurants and bars, and that it shouldn't always be left up to the discretion of the owner of the establishment. Today we're going to talk about the overall health of the employees and how that becomes affected, the economic effects of a smoking ban, and then the overall health effects on the community when a smoking ban is implemented. So to begin, I'd like to start off with a little story about a lady named Sarah. And I saw this story on a website called KISS.org. That stands for Kids Involuntarily Inhaling Secondhand Smoke. And the website is mainly about children who are forced to breathe in smoke from parents or grandparents or someone of that nature, and how it usually affects them. It usually ends up giving them asthma or some sort of negative effect. But the story that I'm going to talk about is about a young lady named Sarah, and she was a special education teacher. She actually did not make enough money doing special ed at the elementary school, so she used to work at a bar at night. And she had issues with the smoke and kind of her breathing before, and the owner had done some minor things. He'd given her a little mask that she could breathe into that gave her extra oxygen, but really hadn't done anything to affect the amount of smoke she was breathing in. And then one night, it was so bad for her that she asked to leave, and just so she could try to recuperate and be ready for school the next morning. Well, the next morning, she didn't show up, and she was always on time. She didn't call in sick. So the principal was a little worried. He actually drove out to her house and ended up finding her dead on the floor. Although this is an extreme example, it just shows how the employee's health can be affected. And most people will say, oh, well, if you don't like the smoke, then you should just go to a different establishment if you're a customer. That all changes a little bit when you're actually an employee and you can't just go work wherever you want. Now let's discuss some of the effects on the employees of an establishment where smoking is allowed. Let's talk about some of the economic effects. Most owners of an establishment where they allow smoking, they all claim that a smoking ban will cut down on their overall revenues and really hurt them in the long run. There was a study by the Center for Disease Control that was published online that actually did research on this, and it included, I believe, 43 cities. And in these cities, it actually showed that every place that a smoking ban was enacted, there was no economic effect whatsoever. It all evened out after a year. And they studied 12 years before and then 1 year after. So there really was very little economic effect, which is what many of the owners are afraid of actually occurring. Secondly, there was a newspaper article from Henderson, North Carolina, where a smoking ban had just been enacted in Henderson, and this reporter was going around and asking business owners their thoughts on it. And all the owners actually, they're quite negative, and they were very fearful of the fact that their business they're gonna lose business because of this. And then she went back a couple months later, and she actually found out that all of their businesses had increased. They were all doing more business, and they said that a lot more families were coming in to eat at their restaurants and to go drink at their bar, and they didn't have to worry about their kids breathing in all this secondhand smoke and putting their kids at risk for health effects. Lastly, I would like to discuss the overall health of the community and how that is affected by a smoking ban. As many of you might think, there really isn't that much of an effect, because how many people really go to bars and restaurants where people are just smoking and it's really negatively influencing your health? That unfortunately is incorrect. A study from USA Today was talking about a study where after a smoking ban was enacted, approximately 15% of total hospitalizations were reduced. And this is just a broad generalization, but that is a massive decrease. In addition, there were studies that showed that 16% of stroke hospitalizations were reduced, and 24% of respiratory hospitalizations were reduced, which are it's a really large number of people if you take into consideration the amount of people in the study and how big the communities were. Lastly, they also showed that the more comprehensive a smoking ban was, the more of a positive effect it had on people's health. This was shown by a study in a county in Minnesota where in 2002, they enacted a smoking ban in just restaurants. And that had absolutely no effect on the heart attack rate of people in the county. And then 5 years later, in 2007, they decided they wanted to make it more comprehensive, and they banned smoking in bars as well. After they banned smoking in bars, the heart rate, or the amount of people with heart attacks, decreased by 33%, which is that's a third of the entire population, which is really just a phenomenal impact that smoking was having on the people in this community. This statistic is even more incredible when you think about the fact that diabetes and obesity were increasing during this time period, that the heart attack rate was decreasing by 33%. Overall, there are pros and cons to the city banning smoking, but I think this is one of those cases where the overall health of the general population should supersede the benefit of the very few people who still would like to smoke in a restaurant. I originally thought that an owner of a restaurant should be able to decide if he wanted to ban smoking or not. But after doing all of my research, I realized that the negative effects are really a lot greater. So I like to make you all consider that although you originally think a smoking ban like this would be a horrible idea, in the end, the overall health and well-being of the society can be very beneficial. Thank you.